Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Simply Frugal Homemaker. This morning, I wanted to share with y'all 5 time-saving tips for meal prep. Now, meal prep can be really overwhelming at times, especially whenever you are trying to fix things that are more healthy, more home-cooked meals, trying to get away from all of the packaged stuff and pre-made things, and it's really not that complicated. So the first tip I want to cover is to keep it simple. Now, a lot of times whenever we're trying to fix healthy foods for our families, it can be overwhelming with trying to get all of these different foods in there. Cooking it all from scratch, not going with prepackaged, pre-made foods, it can be very overwhelming. But something to keep in mind is the more simple it is, not only the easier it is, but most of the time the healthier it is. Whenever I focus on a meal, I generally think of just 3 points of it. You don't have to fix a whole 5-course meal. I basically do my main dish, a side dish, and a salad. Sometimes I'll add bread in there. So if you just keep it simple like that, you can do a lot of that stuff in a small amount of time. So some of the things that help me out with keeping it simple is to get frozen veggies or blanch them and freeze them myself. I like to use frozen veggies as opposed to canned veggies because whenever a vegetable is canned, a lot of times that heat cooks out some of the nutrients. So I want something that's only lightly blanched and frozen so that way I still have the majority of the nutrients inside of it. Secondly is I will use pre-made salads. Now I'm not talking about pre-made salads that you get from the store. I'm talking about making them yourself. And I'll talk about this in a little while. So the main thing that you want to keep in mind is to keep it simple. Complicated doesn't work. Now, farther down the road, whenever you're more used to incorporating all of these different methods into your meal planning, then you can go a little more complicated, do a little more fancy things, and explore from there. But for right now, just start out simply. Okay, the second point I like to cover is to use the right tools. There's so many tools that we have in today's world that makes meal prep super easy. Some of my favorite tools to use are the crock pot, my oven timed, so most of your ovens now have where you can set the timer for it to start at a certain time and end at a certain time, and I absolutely love that because I can stick something in the oven, set the timer for my start time and stop time, and leave and not have to worry about it, knowing that the oven will come on when it needs to come on and my food will be ready whenever we're ready to eat. Another thing is the freezer. I think a lot of times the freezer is underappreciated because for me, it can be an absolute lifesaver, especially if I'm in a hurry and I want to make a good, healthy meal and I don't have a lot of time. I will pre-cook and freeze a lot of things such as like quinoa or rice or just things that kind of add in and complete a meal. A canner, if you are not into canning yet, don't worry about it. But if it's something that you enjoy doing, it is so easy to make a big batch of something and can the leftovers whenever you have time, and then later down the road you can just grab a can of goods out of the pantry and put it in a pot. One of the things that I like to do is I like making massive amounts of beans at a time and then just canning whatever we don't eat that day or the next. So things like that you can plan ahead of time and just say, okay, I have time today, so I'm making a big batch of something and I will can the leftovers. I do this with beans, I do it with soups without meat. I'll do a big batch of soup and take out some before I put any meat in it and I can that. You can can it with the meat in it, but personally, it's not a level that I'm at yet. But it is possible, it's just not something I do at the moment. So a lot of these things can be very helpful. The last tool I want to talk about is a dehydrator. Now, not everybody has a dehydrator, and if you don't worry about it. I find the dehydrator is really amazing for whenever you have a surplus of seasonal fruits and veggies. You can just simply cut them up, put them in dehydrator and dry them and add them later to things. Like I love doing dehydrated fruit. If I get a case of fruit or if I pick a lot of berries or whatever, if we dehydrate them, they're just the most amazing thing to have for snacks or to add into salads. For veggies, whenever I dry them, it's super easy to just get my big jar of dried veggies and just pour them in water for a soup. So dehydrator can also save a lot of time in the long run. So that is my second tip. Tip number 3 is to plan ahead. Now, this is hard for a lot of people because most of us just run in the kitchen last minute, oh, I've got to do something for supper, and it doesn't pull together like we want it to. Well, one thing that I have learned is it saves time to take your time the first time. So if you sit down once a week and just kind of plan a little schedule of what you will have for meals in the next week, it makes it so much easier throughout the week, because whenever you come up to mealtime, you know exactly what you're going to have and you can have prepared for it ahead of time. One of the things that I like to get is I have a meal planner, and it basically has for every day of the week, it has breakfast, lunch, and supper for every day of the week. And I'll go through generally Saturday evening, Sunday evening, I'll go through and I will fill out what my meal plan is for the week. But the nice thing about having a meal plan is you don't necessarily have to have everything on that particular day. If I have breakfast on Tuesday and my husband is just really, can we not do oatmeal today? I'm just really not feeling that great. Okay, well, I'll do toast instead today because I have that for Friday. So I'll just swap the two out. Or we have somebody over and I really don't want to just do oatmeal for guests, so I will swap it and I'll do omelets instead. So it's just kind of a guideline, but it also gives you just a list of things that you can have ready at a moment's notice. So that way you know whenever you look at it, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and you can know how things are going to work out the rest of the week. Tip number 4 is probably one of my favorites, and that is bulk prep. A lot of people get a little overwhelmed whenever they think about food prep because they think it takes forever to do just a little bit. Well, for me, it saves a ton of time to do my bulk prep. One of my favorite things to bulk prep is salads for my entire week. Earlier, I talked about pre-made salads, and this is what I'm going to talk about right now. I will literally get all of the veggies and everything that I need together for a salad, say on Sunday afternoon. I love doing my meal prepping on Sunday afternoons because it's kind of a low down time where I'm not having to be focused on a bunch of other things. So I will get everything, I'll chop all of my veggies and I will do all of it, and I will literally make about 6 big salads. And that covers for lunch, that covers for suppers, whatever I decide to do with it, but I do my basic groundwork for salad. And so I'll do like my basic lettuce and spinach or mixed greens or whatever, and then I have my basic veggies that I always have on my salad, like cucumber and carrots and sugar snap peas. And then I'll play around with things that are seasonal. So like if I have like squash or zucchini, I'll chop those up and put them in there. If I have fresh tomatoes, I'll put those in there. I will not cut tomatoes. I'll generally just use cherry tomatoes and put them in there whole. And if I have just the larger tomatoes, I will actually store those on the side and cut them up whenever it's actually time to have salad. But having all of that prepared ahead of time cuts down on prep time during a meal. Or if it's lunchtime and I've totally forgotten about it, I can just go and grab a salad out of the refrigerator, and it's like, we'll at least have salad. It's good and healthy, and we're there. So salads are one of my favorite things. Another thing I like to bulk prep is meat, like chicken. Chicken is one of my favorites because I'll make a big crock pot full of chicken. I'll cook it down, and then I have it for salads. I have it for tacos. I have it to put barbecue and do barbecue chicken sandwiches. It's just, you can do a lot with just that much. I'll freeze it. I'll make a big batch and I'll freeze some already cooked, so that way it cuts down a lot on meal prep time. If I'm just like in a really, really big hurry and I don't have time to do anything, I can just grab a bag of chicken out of the freezer and thaw it and throw it on top of a salad or on a bread with mayonnaise and mustard or something. Another thing that I like prepping ahead of time is to bake sweet potatoes and regular potatoes. And this is so super simple because all you have to do is wash your sweet potatoes and regular potatoes, and I'll generally, poke them with a fork and coat them with olive oil. I'll put in a bowl, I'll put olive oil, salt, and pepper, and then I'll coat the potatoes with that and wrap it up in foil and just bake all of them in the oven at once. It takes, maybe an hour and a half having a lot of them in there, but in the long run, it saves me a lot of time because then all I have to do is go to the refrigerator. It's already fully cooked. All I have to do is reheat it, and because it's in the skin, it stays really soft once you've reheated it. Lastly, I like doing beans. Now, beans are one of those universal things that I can make a ton of and I will always have a use for. I will either freeze them or can them once I'm done, but I will generally cook a huge crock pot full of beans and I'll save them for soup, for refried beans, to add something a little different to my salad. You name it, I have done it. If I do black beans, I'll pre-cook a bunch of them because I love making black bean cake. I'll do a huge batch of chickpeas and freeze them in 2-cup bags so that way I have something that I can take out really quickly and make an amazing hummus. So a lot of my bulk prep I can do ahead of time and it saves so much time in the long run. Okay, the last tip that I want to cover is don't be afraid of leftovers. Leftovers is probably one of the easiest meals that you can have, and it doesn't have to be as it is. So when I was younger, I was in charge of making lunch for my family for a certain amount of time. I always kind of got complaints whenever I did leftovers, so one thing that I found that was fun to do was to repurpose my leftovers into something completely different. One of my favorite things to make was Mexican spaghetti casserole. We would have spaghetti with corn and whatever the night before, and I would take those leftovers, I would take the spaghetti and the sauce and the corn out, I would mix it all together with some taco seasoning, and I'd put it in a casserole dish, then I would spread sour cream over it, and then cheese on top of that, and just pop it in the oven. My siblings loved it. And so it's one of those things that we never liked reheated spaghetti, but whenever I fixed it as Mexican spaghetti casserole, everybody loved it and it all got eaten every time. Another thing that I really like to do is whenever we would have something like red beans and rice the night before, I would often mix up the red beans and rice, add some taco seasoning, and then I would put it in some tortillas with a little bit of salsa, roll it up and put them in a casserole dish. Once the casserole dish was full, I would put sour cream and salsa on top and then cheese on top of that, stick it in the oven and bake it. Now you'll notice both of those recipes were kind of Mexican flavored. I love Mexican food. So that is just some of the simple things that I would do to kind of repurpose our leftovers, but there are tons of things that you can do to repurpose leftovers. You can have, if you have like steak the night before, you can do a stew the next night. If you have chicken or turkey, you can chop it up to put on salads or make like a barbecue meat sandwich. There are so many things that you can do to repurpose your leftovers. So do not be afraid to cook enough to have leftovers and actually do something with later. So that wraps up our 5 time saving tips for meal prep. I hope that was helpful to you. If you have any suggestions or time saving tips that you yourself use, please comment below and share them with me because I am always looking for more tips myself. Thank you for watching and have a great day.